My fiance kept pressuring me to sign a prenup just in case, so I had my lawyer add a clause he definitely didn't read. When Garrett first brought up the prenup 6 months before our wedding, I wasn't suspicious. He was a successful architect, and I understood wanting to protect his assets. "It's just standard practice," he said, sliding the papers across our kitchen table. "My business partner insists all the guys do this." But then he started getting weird about it. Every few days, he'd casually mention how important it was that we get this handled soon. When I suggested we both hire separate lawyers to review it properly, he waved me off. "Mine already took care of everything. We just need your signature." The document was 47 pages of dense legal language that essentially said if we divorced, I'd get nothing. No alimony, no claim to property acquired during marriage, no retirement benefits. Even gifts I'd received would revert to him. "This seems pretty one-sided," I told him. Garrett's jaw tightened. "Do you want to marry me or not?" Red flag number 1. When I insisted on having my own attorney review it, he exploded. "You don't trust me? After 3 years together?" Then came the guilt trips about wedding costs and how stressed he was about his big project. Red flag number 2. My lawyer Patricia was horrified by the prenup's terms. "This is financial abuse in legal form," she said. "But if you're determined to sign, let me add some protections." We crafted additional clauses buried in the middle of the document, standard legal language about asset disclosure, property valuations, and mandatory mediation. Nothing that would raise eyebrows during a quick scan, including one very special provision. The day I brought the revised prenup home, Garrett barely glanced at it before signing. "Finally," he muttered. "Now we can focus on important things." 2 weeks later, I discovered what those important things were. His phone buzzed during dinner. The text preview showed, "Can't wait for our trip to Cabo after your wedding. Love you." From someone named Ivy. I waited until he showered, then scrolled through months of messages. Garrett had been planning his honeymoon in Mexico with his girlfriend of 8 months. They'd booked adjoining hotel rooms and discussed how long he'd need to stay married to me before filing for divorce. "She's loaded," one message read. "This prenup guarantees I'll get half of everything when we split." Except Garrett had signed without reading Patricia's additions, including the clause specifying that any party who commits adultery during the engagement or marriage forfeits all rights to marital property and owes the faithful spouse $500,000 in damages. I printed everything. The next morning, I called Patricia. "Execute the adultery clause. I have documentation." Garrett's face when the process server arrived was worth every penny of Patricia's fees. The legal papers outlined his infidelity, his planned fraud, and his new financial obligations. "You can't do this," he stammered, scanning the documents frantically. "Actually, I can. Check page 23 of your prenup, the part you didn't read." His business partner's office called that afternoon, terminating their partnership. Apparently, Garrett's standard practice prenup advice wasn't company policy. It was his personal recommendation to help his buddies scam their fiancés. Ivy dumped him when she learned about the $500,000 judgment. Last month, I used the settlement money for a down payment on my dream house. Garrett's working at Home Depot now, but that wasn't the end of it. 3 weeks after the process server delivered Garrett's judgment papers, my phone started ringing. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. "Is this Melanie?" The voice was shaky. "Young. Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Qley. I saw the news article about your fiancé. About the prenup thing." She paused. "I think he did the same thing to my sister." I sat up in bed. "What do you mean? Garrett Pembroke, right? Tall, dark hair, works in architecture. He dated my sister Brooke for 2 years, made her sign something before they got engaged. Then he cheated on her with some woman from his gym." My stomach dropped. When was this? "Last year. Brooke got nothing when they split. He kept her grandmother's ring, her car payments, everything. She's still paying off their joint credit cards." I grabbed a pen. "Can you give me your sister's number?" Within an hour, I was sitting across from Brooke at a coffee shop downtown. She was 26, worked as a kindergarten teacher, and looked like she hadn't slept in months. "I knew something was off about that prenup," she said, stirring her latte absently. "But Garrett kept saying it was normal, that all successful couples did it." She pulled out a manila folder. "I saved everything. The papers, the emails, even recordings of our fights about it. The prenup was nearly identical to mine. Same 47 pages, same one-sided terms. But this one had been prepared by a different lawyer. Garrett's signature was at the bottom, along with Brooke's." "Who was the other woman?" I asked. Brooke's face darkened. "Some fitness instructor named Tasha. Garrett was paying for her personal training sessions while we were engaged, 45 minutes twice a week for 6 months. I did the math. That overlapped with when Garrett started dating me." "Brooke, I need to ask you something important. Did Garrett ever mention his business partner giving him advice about prenups?" She nodded slowly. "All the time. He said his partner, some guy named Rick, told all the guys at his firm to protect themselves, that women these days were just after money." Red flag number 3, and I was just getting started. I called Patricia that afternoon. "We need to dig deeper. I think Garrett's been running this scam for years." "How deep are we talking?" Patricia asked. "However deep it goes." Patricia hired a private investigator named Tony Castellanos, former police detective specialized in financial fraud. Within a week, he'd found 2 more victims. Rachel, a nurse from Portland, dated Garrett for 18 months, signed a prenup, caught him cheating with a coworker, lost her savings, her condo, and her faith in relationships. And Kiara, a graphic designer from Seattle. Same story, different year, prenup, cheating, financial devastation. Tony spread the documents across my kitchen table, the same table where Garrett had first shown me his prenup. Here's the pattern, Tony said, pointing to highlighted sections. Each prenup is nearly identical. Same law firm prepared them all. Same terms, same loopholes. And look at this. He showed me a bank statement. Garrett's been receiving payments from something called Pembroke Investment Holdings. $50,000 deposited 6 months after each breakup. My blood ran cold. Who owns Pembroke Investment Holdings? Still working on that. But I've got a feeling we're going to find some very interesting names. Tony's hunch was right. Pembroke Investment Holdings was a shell company owned by Richard Costas, Garrett's business partner. The same Rick who'd supposedly been giving Garrett advice about protecting himself, but it got worse. Tony found contracts between Garrett and Rick dating back 5 years. Garrett wasn't just scamming women for money, he was being paid to do it. The contracts were detailed, systematic. Garrett would target successful women with significant assets, date them for 12-18 months, propose with a prenup designed to strip them of everything, cheat to force a breakup, then collect his fee from Rick. It's like a perverted business model, Patricia said when I showed her the evidence. Emotional fraud as a revenue stream. I stared at the contracts, feeling sick. How many women? Tony consulted his notes. We've confirmed 7 victims over 5 years, but there might be more. 7 women, 7 lives disrupted, 7 hearts broken for profit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brooke's hollow eyes, Rachel's trembling hands, Kiara's defensive posture when she talked about trust. Garrett hadn't just cheated on me. He'd made destroying women's lives his career. The next morning, I called Patricia. I want to sue Rick too, and I want to find every victim. That's going to be expensive, Patricia warned. And complicated. I don't care. Use whatever you need from the settlement money. We set up a hotline. Patricia posted a carefully worded notice in the legal section of 3 major newspapers. Were you asked to sign a prenuptial agreement by architect Garrett Pembroke? Contact us regarding your legal rights. The call started immediately. Victim number 8. Diana, a veterinarian from Austin. She'd been smart enough to refuse the prenup, so Garrett had simply disappeared one day. Blocked her number, moved out of their shared apartment, left her with a lease she couldn't afford alone. Victim number 9. Naomi, a software engineer from Denver. She'd signed the prenup but discovered Garrett's cheating before the wedding. When she tried to break the engagement, he sued her for the cost of the wedding deposits, $23,000. By the end of the first week, we had 12 confirmed victims. Tony found more contracts in Rick's files. The business had been expanding. Rick was recruiting other men, teaching them Garrett's system. They'd been planning to franchise the operation. It's like a pyramid scheme, Tony explained. But instead of selling products, they're selling heartbreak. I called an emergency meeting with Patricia and Tony. We need to stop this now before they hurt anyone else. Patricia leaned back in her chair. What are you thinking? Class action lawsuit against both of them, and we go public with everything. That's a big risk, Patricia said. We'd be painting a target on your back. I thought about Brooke, still paying off Garrett's credit card bills. About Rachel, who'd moved back in with her parents because she couldn't afford rent. About Naomi, who'd told me she hadn't dated anyone in 2 years because she was terrified of being fooled again. Some things are worth the risk. Patricia filed the class action suit on a Tuesday. By Thursday, it was front page news. Local architect accused of operating romance scam, read the headline in the Tribune. The article detailed the contracts, the shell company, the systematic destruction of women's lives for profit. Garrett's photo was right there on the front page, looking smug in his architect headshot, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. The story went viral. By Friday afternoon, 3 more women had called our hotline. By Monday, we had 17 victims total. The Today Show wanted an interview. So did 60 Minutes, Dateline, and every major news outlet. Patricia advised against it, but I said yes to the Today Show. The more people who know about this, the better, I told her. Maybe we can prevent it from happening to someone else. The interview aired on a Wednesday morning. I sat across from the host, calm and collected, while they played excerpts from the secret recordings Tony had found in Rick's office. The key is making them think it's their idea, Garrett's voice said clearly through the studio speakers. You plant the seed about protecting assets, then act reluctant when they suggest the prenup. The host looked disgusted. And this was a business for them? A very profitable one, I replied. Rick was paying Garrett $50,000 per victim. They'd identified it as an untapped market. Successful women with assets and trusting hearts. The interview segment was 12 minutes long. By the time it ended, our hotline had logged 43 calls. Not all of them were from victims. Some were from lawyers offering to help pro bono. Others were from journalists wanting to investigate similar schemes in their cities. But 3 calls stood out. The first was from Garrett's mother. I had no idea, she said, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry for what my son did to you, to all of you. The second was from Rick's ex-wife. I always wondered where that money was coming from, she said. Rick told me it was investment returns, but the timing never made sense. The third call made my blood freeze. I think they might have killed my daughter. The woman's name was Dorothy Brennan. Her daughter, Melissa, had been found dead in her apartment 6 months earlier. Apparent suicide, single gunshot wound to the head. Melissa had been dating someone named Garrett, Dorothy said. She was supposed to marry him, but something went wrong. She became very depressed, stopped eating, stopped returning my calls. I gripped the phone. Mrs. Brennan, did Melissa ever mention a prenup? That's all she talked about in her last few months, how this prenup was going to ruin her financially. She'd inherited money from her father, about $2 million. She was terrified of losing it. Patricia and I drove to Dorothy's house that same day. She lived in a modest ranch in the suburbs, surrounded by photos of her daughter. Melissa had been beautiful. Dark hair, bright smile, looked like she'd never hurt anyone in her life. She was a social worker, Dorothy explained, worked with foster children. The inheritance was supposed to help her open her own agency. Dorothy handed me a manila envelope. I found these in Melissa's things after she died. I didn't understand what they meant. Inside were copies of emails between Melissa and Garrett, the usual love bombing pattern, followed by pressure about the prenup. But these emails had a different tone, more aggressive, more threatening. "If you can't trust me enough to sign this," one email read, "then maybe we're not right for each other. Maybe you're just like every other gold digger I've dated." Another email was worse. "I've been talking to my lawyer. Apparently, if someone dies before a wedding, the surviving partner can claim emotional damages from the estate. Just something to think about." I felt sick reading it. Dorothy was crying quietly. The police said it was suicide, that she was depressed about her relationship. But Melissa wasn't suicidal. She was the strongest person I knew. I handed the emails to Patricia. "Can we reopen the investigation?" "We can try," Patricia said. "But it's going to be difficult. The death was ruled a suicide. We'd need compelling evidence to get it reopened." Tony went to work immediately. He reviewed the police reports, interviewed Melissa's friends, and examined the crime scene photos. What he found was disturbing. Melissa had supposedly shot herself with her left hand, but according to her medical records, she was right-handed and had limited mobility in her left hand due to a childhood injury. The gun was registered to Garrett, and security cameras at Melissa's apartment complex showed Garrett's car in the parking lot the night she died. But the police had missed all of this because they'd assumed it was suicide from the start. Tony brought his findings to the detective who'd handled the original case. Detective Morrison was a veteran cop, close to retirement, who didn't appreciate being told he'd missed evidence. "Look, I understand you want closure," Morrison said, "but sometimes people just reach their breaking point. The girl was depressed about her relationship. It happens." "Did you know the gun was registered to her boyfriend?" Tony asked. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "That's not unusual. Couples share firearms all the time." "Did you know she was left-handed?" "What does that matter?" Tony spread the crime scene photos across Morrison's desk. "She supposedly shot herself with her left hand. But look at these medical records. She had nerve damage in her left hand from a childhood accident. Couldn't even write with it." Morrison studied the photos for a long moment. His face grew pale. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "How did we miss this?" Within a week, the police had reopened Melissa's case as a homicide investigation. Garrett was arrested on a Thursday morning at the Home Depot where he'd been working. The arrest was captured by news cameras. Garrett in his orange apron, looking confused and terrified as officers read him his rights. Rick was arrested the same day at his architectural firm. They seized computers, files, and bank records. The evidence of their scheme was overwhelming. But the murder charge against Garrett was what really captured public attention. The story was now national news. A handsome architect who seduced successful women, stole their money, and possibly killed one when she threatened to expose him. People magazine put Melissa's photo on their cover, "The Woman Who Died for Love." The trial started 6 months later. I testified about the prenup scam, the systematic fraud, the contracts between Garrett and Rick. 12 other women told their stories. Dorothy Brennan wept as she described finding her daughter's body. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Garrett Pembroke was a predator who had escalated from financial fraud to murder when one of his victims became a threat. Garrett's defense was pathetic. His lawyer argued that the prenups were legal, that the relationships were consensual, that Melissa's death was still suicide despite the evidence. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on 17 counts of fraud. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Garrett was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rick got 15 years for his role in the fraud scheme. The civil lawsuit resulted in a $12 million judgment against both men and their assets. Every victim received compensation, with Melissa's estate getting the largest share, but money couldn't undo the damage. Brooke still flinches when men approach her. Rachel moved across the country and changed her name. Naomi started a support group for women who've been victims of romance scams. I kept Melissa's photo on my desk throughout the trial. A reminder that this was about more than money or justice. It was about a young woman who'd wanted to help foster children and instead became a victim herself. 2 years later, I got a call from Dorothy Brennan. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "I've started a foundation in Melissa's name for foster children who age out of the system. It's funded by her inheritance, the money Garrett tried to steal." "That's beautiful," I said. "Melissa would be proud." "I also wanted to thank you," Dorothy continued. "If you hadn't stood up to him, if you hadn't fought back, he might have killed other women. You saved lives." I thought about that conversation for a long time after we hung up. 6 months later, Patricia called with news. "Remember the Today Show interview you did?" she asked. "Of course. It's been used as evidence in 17 other cases across the country. Apparently, Garrett and Rick's scheme inspired copycats. But your interview helped law enforcement identify the patterns." I sat down heavily. 17 more cases, 17 more prosecutions, all successful, and every one of them referenced your testimony as a key piece of evidence. The ripple effects continued. A year later, Congress passed the Melissa Brennan Act, requiring background checks for anyone requesting information from inheritance databases. It closed a loophole that predators like Garrett had been using to identify wealthy targets. 3 years after the trial, I got married. His name is David, he's a teacher, and he refused to even discuss a prenup. I trust you completely, he said when I brought it up. If you want to protect your assets, that's your choice. But I'm not asking you to sign away your rights. Our wedding was small, intimate, and filled with people who genuinely cared about us. Brooke was there. So was Rachel. Naomi gave a toast about finding love after betrayal. Dorothy Brennan attended as well. She gave me a locket with Melissa's photo inside. Melissa believed in justice, she told me. You made sure she got it. 5 years later, the Melissa Brennan Foundation has helped over 300 foster children transition to independent living. The foundation's logo is a phoenix rising from ashes, Melissa's favorite symbol. Garrett is serving his life sentence at a maximum security prison in California. He appeals his conviction every year. Every year, the appeals are denied. Rick was released after serving 12 years of his 15-year sentence. He works at a gas station now, prohibited from practicing architecture or working in finance. His ex-wife remarried and moved to another state. I sometimes wonder if there are other women out there, victims we never found, stories we never heard. Tony estimates we uncovered maybe 60% of Garrett's crimes, but I sleep well knowing that Garrett will never hurt another woman. The house I bought with the settlement money is beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a garden, and a home office where I work as a victim's advocate. I help women navigate the legal system after financial abuse, and I testify in cases involving romance scams. Last week, a young woman named Zoe called my hotline. Her boyfriend was pressuring her to sign a prenup, making her feel guilty for hesitating, telling her it was standard practice. I keep thinking about your story, she told me, the one from the Today Show, and I realized his prenup sounds exactly like the one you described. I drove to meet Zoe that same day. Her prenup was virtually identical to the one Garrett had given me, down to the specific language about gift reversion. We called Patricia. It turns out Zoe's boyfriend had attended one of Rick's seminars before Rick was arrested. He'd been using Garrett's exact playbook, word for word. Zoe broke up with him the next day. She kept the ring, which, according to the law, was a gift she was entitled to keep. She sold the ring and used the money to start law school. I want to help other women like you helped me, she told me. The cycle continues. Women helping women, refusing to let predators operate in shadows, demanding accountability for those who would exploit trust for profit. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I just signed Garrett's original prenup. If I trusted his assurances, ignored my instincts, prioritized keeping the peace over protecting myself. Melissa might still be alive. 17 other women might not have been victimized by copycat schemes. The Melissa Brennan Act might never have been passed. One woman's refusal to be silenced can change everything. Patricia retired last year, but she still takes my calls. You know, she told me recently, in 30 years of practicing law, your case was the most satisfying victory I ever had. Why? I asked. Because it proved that predators can be stopped, that systematic abuse can be exposed, that one person's courage can protect countless others. I keep Melissa's photo on my desk at home, next to a picture from my wedding day. Both women remind me of something important. Love should make you stronger, not more vulnerable. It should add to your life, not subtract from it. And if someone asks you to sign away your rights for love, they're not offering love at all. They're offering a transaction, and you deserve so much more than that. The foundation sends me updates about the foster children they've helped. There's Marcus, who's now studying to be a social worker, and Priya, who started her own nonprofit for at-risk youth, and dozens of others who are building lives that Melissa would be proud of. Her legacy isn't the tragedy of how she died. It's the lives that continue because of how she lived, and how we all fought to honor her memory with action. Every year on the anniversary of Melissa's death, Dorothy and I visit her grave. We bring flowers and updates about the foundation. We tell her about the women who've been helped, the laws that have been changed, the predators who've been stopped. This year, we also brought news that another state had passed legislation inspired by the Melissa Brennan Act. She's still saving people, Dorothy said, placing a bouquet of white lilies on the headstone. As we walked back to the car, Dorothy turned to me. You know what I think about sometimes? What? All the women Garrett would have hurt if you hadn't fought back. All the Melissas who are still alive because you refused to be a victim. I thought about Zoe, now halfway through law school. About Brooke, who's finally dating again. About the 17 copycat schemes that were shut down because investigators knew what to look for. About the women whose names I'll never know, who heard the story and trusted their instincts when something felt wrong. That's the real victory. Not the money or the prison sentences or the news coverage. It's the women who are safe because one woman decided to read the fine print. Because one woman refused to sign away her rights for love. Because one woman proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to a predator is simply refuse to be quiet. Garrett thought he was so clever, bearing that adultery clause where he assumed I'd never notice it. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a lot of things. But he was especially wrong about assuming that love makes women stupid. Love makes women strong. It makes them protective. It makes them willing to fight for what's right, even when the cost is high. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, love makes women angry enough to change the world. The settlement money is long gone now, donated to the foundation or spent on legal fees for other victims, but I've never regretted a penny of it. After all, what good is money if you don't use it to make sure other people don't suffer the way you did? David and I are trying to have children now. And when I think about the world I want to bring them into, I'm glad it's a world where predators like Garrett are behind bars, where women like Melissa are remembered and honored, where love is measured not by what you're willing to sacrifice, but by what you're willing to protect. That's the world Patricia's fine print helped create, and that's worth more than any prenup ever could be.